السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مساكم الله بالخير. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Krypto Labs. Tonight we have a very special event with distinguished guests who are exceptional female role models. They will share their views on various perspectives on female leadership. The Female Leaders Forum marks the launch of the Krypto Labs Womenpreneur campaign, which aims to support and empower women in the field of innovation, entrepreneurship, and startups. But first, allow me to take a few minutes to give you a brief about Krypto Labs. Krypto Labs is a virtual global incubator with a unique ecosystem for funding groundbreaking startups. Krypto Labs is a place where you can make dreams come true. We are honored to have all of you present at our state-of-the-art innovation center. For those coming for the first time, we officially opened, by the way, only a few months ago. We had the first contest, and some of you know that, we had around 2,000 applications from 75 different countries around the world. We had applications from 23 different sectors, and we already made an investment into one of the winning companies. We currently have a second contest on innovation, and this contest happens to be in drone technology because we believe that drone technology will disrupt many sectors that you see today. We received around 300 applications so far, and May 6 will be the contest event. We have also launched the incubation, which is a program for startups to come, get incubated, and then they graduate after around 4 months, where they can actually take the products to market. So that incubation program, we already have around 100 applications globally. If you think about the core business of Krypto Labs, I can say it in 5 words: incubation, mentorship, networking, seed funding, and catalysis. We have held a number of events here. Some of them has been initiated by us, and some of them has been initiated naturally by the environment of entities, whether they're government or private. Every day, 100 individuals spend their mornings and evenings here to work on their innovative products which will change industries. In our space, we also have given away complimentary access to students, freelancers, entrepreneurs, and startups. You can find most of the information on the website. And tomorrow, we have people visiting us from the US to talk about their leading blockchain platform. They will be presenting it in Krypto Labs, and they'll be talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency developments. With that, I hope I gave you a quick introduction on Krypto Labs, and we look forward to have a good evening. And I would like to introduce the Master of Ceremony and Moderator for tonight's event, Ms. Tamara Pupik.
Good evening, everyone. As you've heard, I'm Tamara Pupik. I'm Managing Editor of Entrepreneur Middle East magazine. I believe you've heard about our magazine, and I'm really glad to be with you here tonight, and many thanks to the Krypto Labs team for inviting us. Welcome to the first Female Leaders Forum by Krypto Labs. As you've heard, the event marks the launch of Womenpreneur campaign, which is a special campaign during which businesswomen will be giving special promotions and discounts to join this space. And we'll also have a chance to apply for a series of 5 workshops aimed at teaching them the basics of setting up e-commerce websites. Before we start, I just want to share a few organizational details with you. First of all, the event is being broadcasted by Krypto Labs multimedia platform, SWOO. So please feel free to invite your friends from around the world to join in the discussion. Secondly, we will all be honored to have Her Excellency Hafsa Al-Ulama, the UAE Ambassador to Brazil, deliver a keynote speech to us tonight. And after that, I hope you will enjoy the panel discussion. We've prepared some interesting topics to talk about with Heather Henyon, founder of Vane and founding general partner of Mindshift Capital. Her Excellency Mariam Al-Miri, CEO of 2454, Al-Reem Saif, celebrity influencer and entrepreneur, and Elisa Freija, founder of Vomina. How we will do it is that we will focus on 4 different topics, 4 different questions, and after each of them, I will open the floor for up to 3 questions from the audience. We will have Solange to help us with the mic. Solange, please. And on the upper floor, we will have Ahmad. Thank you guys for that. So let's start without further ado. I invite Her Excellency Hafsa Al-Ulama to take the stage and deliver the keynote speech. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. Your Excellency, Ambassador Egregia, Ambassador of Brazil to United Arab Emirates, Your Excellency, Ambassador Skokovic, Ambassador of Montenegro to United Arab Emirates, Jassim Siddiqui, friend, Dr. Saleh, and colleagues, friends, and good evening. And it's really an honor for me to be here tonight in this inspirational place, Krypto Labs, Abu Dhabi's hub for innovation and creativity. I will not take too long, but I would like to share with you and also along with the panel speakers views about women empowerment and entrepreneurship. Well, my speech today will try to provide an answer to a fundamental question that keeps on coming to my mind all the time. And I think maybe it's a question that occurs to a lot of us women here. The question itself is actually a title of a movie, which I'm not trying to promote the movie, but this is the question. Are we there yet? I don't know if you've seen the movie. Probably the children have seen it. But to answer this question, we need to see where we are and how far we have come. Well, overall, women have progressed and realized many achievements in the past century. As the world has developed on many fronts, such as literacy, healthcare, and economic output, so have women increased their participation in this development. Of course, this has not come easy. It was after long fights and struggles. A good example for this is the women's suffragette movement in England in early 1900s. Emmeline Pankhurst is maybe a name that a lot of us know. And in the Arab world, a pioneer for Arab women liberation was Huda Sha'rawi of Egypt, for instance. Everybody knows that. But here in United Arab Emirates, we experience better road to empowerment. We were blessed with a visionary leader that encouraged women liberation. The late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan made the development of women a cornerstone of his vision for UAE. This started by emphasizing women education and opening up the doors of employment for women from the early days of our nation. I know this very well because I'm a result of that vision. Her Highness Sheikh Fatma bint Mbarak has shown exemplary leadership by empowering women and encouraging them to be a positive force in the development of the country. Today, UAE is a leader in gender equality and a role model for others to follow. UAE is one of the few countries in the world that ensures by law equal pay between men and women for the same job. And I know this also because I get the same salary that my male colleague gets in our job. So I don't want to say all these positive things as a UAE national, but I would like to give a comment, a quote from an international figure, and that's Christine Lagarde, the managing director of IMF, who has recently said, "The UAE's track record of empowering women is a story to be told globally and an example to be followed around the world." These are the positive things. Of course, we have to have however. So however, despite all this progress and achievements, women still have not reached parity with men in the workforce. There are still many bumps and barriers on the road to getting there. And in my opinion, the glass ceiling has not yet been shattered. To give examples of this, I always would like to look at numbers. I think numbers do all the talking all the time, and especially we are in an area for businesses, and for businesses, numbers are very important. You know, we talk about top line, bottom line, IRR, we do projections. So I would like to rephrase Shakira and say, numbers don't lie. So, thank you. So let me give some of the numbers. According to World Economic Forum, there are only 15 female world leaders currently in office. That is less than 10% of UN member states. That's after 100 years of liberation. If we come to companies, we see the S&P 500 companies. Out of that, only 26 CEOs are women, and that's a mere 5%. And these are the top companies in the world from, all over the world. Between 2010 and 2015, only 10% of venture capital around the world went to women. And if we take United States as an example, and decades after entering the workforce, women hold only 19% of board seats. This is while women continue to outpace men in educational achievement. We know that. 60% of graduates in almost many countries in the world are women, actually. So there seems to be a major gap between academic achievement and obtaining top jobs for women. So clearly, women face many challenges in the workforce, and especially when it comes to setting up their own businesses. So based on my personal experience and interaction with others, I would like to list 4 challenges that I feel are essential for women to overcome on the road to gender equality. First challenge is the social environment. And I have a question here for the audience. How many of us have gone to meetings and networking events and found out that we could count women participants on one hand? I think it happens almost every time we go to meetings. And these are business meetings or other formal meetings. Always women are in the minority. And this creates a lot of pressure and situation for women. Of course, the other issue is the pressure from the family and society. So that is a very big challenge for us to look into. The second challenge, which is very close to startups and businesses, and it's access to funding. The data shows that raising capital for women-owned businesses is extremely difficult. A 2014 Babson College report found that less than 3% of venture capital-funded companies had female CEOs. There seems to be a sort of tribe mentality in VC funding. And if you don't get enough funding, the business becomes very difficult for it to grow. We know that very well. The third challenge for me, and I think this is very important, but it is in the control of us women, it's self-confidence. Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, in her book, Lean In, calls this leadership ambition gap for women. We simply give up too easily. I have seen many cases of this, and we really take a step back where we need to assert ourselves. Fear of failure is often a top concern of women who launch their businesses. And I would like to hear this from the panel later and the discussions that we'll have. And the last challenge is the support network, another area which is very important. Many women entrepreneurs are faced with lack of role models and mentors. Many of them fall short of aggressively networking for their businesses. But as we can see today, and with this kind of event, I think this can be a very interesting area to get into networking and opening up and creating networks. Of course, these challenges will have solutions and ways of overcoming, but I would like to leave that for our discussions later. I would like here to say that we are a lot stronger than we think we are sometimes. We raise families and build generations. We are excellent at multitasking. We take that naturally as we grow. And we are very good at building teams, negotiating, and handling money. We, in brief, have all the leadership skills needed for successful ventures. And if we go back to the question, are we there yet? Maybe we have not reached the destination, but I have a strong conviction that this will be our century. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It will be a tough task now to take the stage after this speech. Thank you so much. So I'm glad to invite my panelists to join me on stage. Let's start with Heather Henyon, founder of Wayne and founding general partner of Mindshift Capital. Please join me on stage. Her Excellency Mariam Almiri, CEO of 2454. Please join the stage. Thank you. Elisa Freija, founder of Womina, and a few other interesting initiatives we will hear about. And Alrim Saif, celebrity influencer and entrepreneur. Please. Thank you. It's working? Yeah. Is it working? Yeah. Good evening. Thank you so much. So to start with, I really believe that we are in the middle of an extraordinary culture moment in the world, because for the first time we are having a real, expansive public conversation about the ways, both subtle and overt, that women are affected on a day-to-day basis, from the Time's Up and Me Too movement to different reports showing that women are somehow systematically prevented from fully participating in the business world. Some of the examples are, for example, a recent Magnet study showing that only 12% of successful female founders in the MENA region are women, which is less when compared to 15% in the EU and 17% in the US, which is also not a figure high enough. Also, it's interesting that only 7 of 150 elected heads of state in the world are women, and only 11 of 192 heads of governments are women. When it comes to the corporate world, for example, out of 500 largest corporations in the US, only 23 have a female CEO. So that's less than 5%. Actually, that's 4.6%. On the other hand, as Her Excellency mentioned, we live in a country that has made significant progress when it comes to achieving gender parity. The UAE aims to be one of the top 25 countries in the world for gender equality by 2020, and one of the many amazing measures is that it's the first country in the Arab world to introduce a mandatory female presence in corporate boardrooms, with a target of 20% by 2020 for listed companies. So these are different statistics. So let's give our own overview. What do you think, how far have we come when it comes to achieving gender balance in the business world today, so both corporate and entrepreneurship?
Good evening. So I think women have come a long way since the last few decades. I believe Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan, the founder of the UAE, from the early days, he knew, he really truly believed in the empowerment and the enabling of women in the society. And for him, it was very simple because he saw the role that Sheikha Fatma bint Mubarak, his wife, plays in advising and in supporting the growth and the development of the country, which is why there was a huge programs to ensure that women in the UAE plays a vital role and continue to develop with the development of the country. So today you see Emirati women in all sectors. You see scientists, you see pilots, you see ambassadors, you see ministers. And this, we are celebrating this today because of that vision. We have, a third of our ministerial posts are women, a third of Federal National Council are women. At 2 for 54, we are 50% women. That was not a strategy, but that shows you the creative, the creativity of the women in the UAE. So for me, we still don't take this as granted. We, as women, we spoke about their level in education and their passion, the way they work with passion. And we continue to work hard so that we are included and involved in the development of the UAE. And this is what will continue for every single day.
Thank you. Heather, what do you think? Not only UAE, so in general.
Yeah. So I don't think we're anywhere close to where we need to be. I think there's still a lot of work to do. And I think what we've been doing isn't working. So we need to try something new. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I've been in finance for almost 20 years. I'm usually the only female in the room. I related very closely to that comment, and I used to think it was just because of networks. We're not in the same networks. In my MBA program at Cornell, I studied finance and entrepreneurship. I was the only woman in the entire group. I was in San Francisco last year, actually almost exactly 1 year ago, and I heard Mitch and Frida Kapoor from the Kapoor Fund speak about unconscious bias. And all of a sudden, I just had this aha moment that actually we all grow up with certain biases, and even myself as a woman, I am biased against women. So I've got about now 80 investments in early stage tech companies in Europe, the US, and the Middle East, and I'm probably also harder on women entrepreneurs without being aware of it. So part of, I think, the challenge is having this open discussion. I don't see it coming quickly to the region. I think there's still not complete awareness around unconscious bias, but I think something that we can all do to advance women's place and where they should be versus where they are now is to start having those discussions and understanding that we're all biased. It's just a matter of figuring out what those biases are. So until we ask the deeper questions, have the open discussions, and are open to change, I don't see the change that needs to happen happening. I hope it's our century. I really do, because it's tiring to see the numbers actually getting worse. The number of the Fortune 500 CEOs, the women at senior levels of banks, of boards. I'm tired of being the only woman on the board. So I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but it's boring. You want to have women around you and feel like they're at the table with you. So I actually used to think part of this was showing up, and I really tried to show up as much as I could. But I think actually I agree now with some of the women that have been saying, it's not about getting a seat at the table, it's about creating our own table. And I think that's what we've got to do until we can correct the lack of parity that exists.
Elisa? Yes, get ready.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think subconscious biases, once you realize that that's such a big player in creating this imbalance, really starts to have each person ask themselves a much deeper level of questions and starts asking themselves, in the moment, not just asking the entrepreneur questions in front of them, but also asking themselves, why am I asking these questions in this way to this person? But I think my perspective looking at the current state of women's role in society really shifted this summer because I was born and raised in Paris, France, and I think I grew up with the wrong assumption that we lived in this post-feminist society, that feminism was something that had happened in the 60s or in the 20s with the suffragette movement, and that we didn't need it anymore, and acknowledging this kind of gender imbalance was actually fueling it. So when I came here to launch an angel investor network in 2013, I quickly saw that actually we were the only women in the room most of the time, and definitely the youngest, but the only women in the room, and it didn't really make sense statistically. And it took us a while before we were able to find other women in finance and other angels that were women that were active in the space, Heather included, right? But they just weren't easy to find. They were there, but as Her Excellency pointed out, there was a lack of role models, and maybe there's a taboo around women kind of openly embracing themselves as potential role models and their stories as something that's needed to share. Fast forward 3 years later, when we built our investor network, we actually realized that it was far easier to build a women-led company and a women-led network in the UAE than it would have been in France or in the United States. And actually going back this summer, been spending a lot of time in Germany because Germany is a country that is, for all intents and purposes, led by a woman and has been led by a woman for 10 years. And yet, when it comes to corporate representation and governmental representation of women, the numbers fall flat. And the UAE is, making leaps and strides ahead of most Western countries when it comes to female inclusion in business and in government. And that shocked me because I think even though I'm Arab and I am a woman in the Middle East, I kind of had this thing that women in the Middle East need that help more than women in the US or women in Europe. And then I actually realized, hold on, this is not a sector thing, it's not a tech thing, nor is it a corporate thing or a governmental thing. This is a global issue that needs to be recognized. And the UAE has this incredible benefit of being a young country. We are only 46 years old, and our leaders acknowledged that there was an issue very early on, which meant that we were able to mitigate and create solutions that radically, involve themselves in our culture. Whereas in Europe and in Germany, where everything is so traditional and so old school, it takes forever just to get one little law passed, and then just to make sure that people are following that law, it takes such a long time. So these incremental changes is what they're battling, right? What women in the Western and more developed countries are battling. Whereas here, from one day to another, we can have, the Gender Balance Council, for example, and we can start we can have a law that guarantees equal pay or that guarantees maternity leave. And that really, really makes a difference, I think. So when it comes to the state of women, I've seen that I think that's my biggest focus right now, is that it's a universal thing and that the people you expect to be ahead of the game actually aren't. And the people that, for whatever reason, the world thinks are actually behind are the ones that are really leading it.
That's super interesting. We'll get back to that. Just quickly, you actually stepped up to your game and launched something interesting for women. Just, you want to share more details about it?
Yes.
Recently?
So Wamina started as an investor network, but recently we've launched 2 initiatives. One is called Wamedia. So the idea was exactly, came up as an answer to this discrepancy that I saw where people, myself included, kind of think that the Middle East is not the most positive place for women, and that we don't have these leaders, these resilient kind of change makers, go-getters, business women or governmental figureheads here that we really do have. So what we wanted to do was create a different narrative around women in the Middle East, and the platform Wamedia is all about sharing real data, real facts, news, and profiles of change makers and not focus that they are women, because obviously they're women, but focus on like their knowledge in certain industries or the changes that they're making. They happen to be women and they happen to be badass.
But it's interesting that soon it will have to be a global platform because women globally need more help
Yes.
than here, right?
Yeah, and so we're starting with the Middle East, but it's definitely going to be something that's going to expand.
Reem, what's your opinion?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about my own experience when I think about women in our country. Being a local Emirati myself, I always compare between my generation and my mom's generation to see the progress. So basically, my mom, she had to study in university a major that she didn't want to study just because all other majors were not allowed at that time. So she had to study to become a teacher. And
Not allowed for women, or?
considered society-wise between people, it was frowned upon. So she had to study a major that she didn't like and work as a teacher, which was not her first choice, just because all women at the time were supposed to work, if they wanted to work somewhere where there were only women. So she had to work in a public school. And I have 8 aunts, 6 of which are teachers because of that reason, and only the youngest 2, who are 10 years older than me, they were able to get away with it. So when I compare her to me, I was able to study media, which was like frowned upon for the longest time in our society, because you're being in TV and people are seeing you, and you're in a mixed environment. I got to study in the university that I chose, which was a mixed university, and my family supported me to study mass communications, which is basically media, and that's in the span of one generation. Like, the difference is one generation. So I think it's a huge progress for us. And now, as I said, even my family supports me. No one thinks it's like frowned upon or wrong. They're all with me, including my father. So I think in the UAE we've made a huge difference in the span of one generation, as I said. And I think it's because of the leadership. We owe them a lot when it comes to women empowerment and actually changing the view of the society itself when it comes to women and where they want, and that they can work in other workplaces other than being teachers, because that was the thing in the 90s. Any woman who wanted to work, mostly they were just working as teachers because they were not allowed to work anywhere else. And now we have so many, media-wise, because I come from media, we have so many Emirati women as presenters, as journalists, and they're traveling and going everywhere. So I think it's a huge progress for us.
As I said, we will take a few questions from the audience after each of the questions raised here. Also, you can tweet your questions at us, to the Krypto Labs team at Krypto Labs AD, and to myself as well, ENT Magazine ME. But first, let's see, what do you think about basically the reports and what you state from your own experience, and the achievements of the UAE are the same. So what is your opinion? What would you like to ask? Yes, we have one question.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Asia. I am an engineer, inventor, and so into entrepreneurship. I would like to say proudly that in the UAE, whenever I go, women are always at higher numbers than men. And when talking about the UAE, like we have our culture, our tradition, religion, and comparing with other countries, which might be more culturally open, I find it, like, I really want to know why we've made this progress comparing with other countries, although we have like some restrictions people might think of, beside leadership, beside our great leadership. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the statement. Anyone, do we have any question from the audience? So in your opinion, do you agree with us on the overview of what's going on? I think, yeah, okay, we have one more question. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, how are you? My name is Tembi. I wanted to just speak about what Heather mentioned about biases. And I'm an entrepreneur myself, and what I've noticed is as women, we don't really support each other as much. It's very difficult. For example, when you have a new idea and you're meeting new women, and you know, as women, you look each other up and down and you give each other eyes, and it's very much intimidating. And in a culture where now men are starting to make that change, I think as women, we also need to make that change to support each other, not just to look at the men to make that change. We also need to do that and support each other. So that's just my issue, which I've been facing currently when you're approaching different women when it comes to innovation or entrepreneurship.
Thank you for your question. Yeah. I think it is a question, just a moment please. I think it is a question that we really don't raise that often or not at all, is do women really support women? You want to add something? Please do, Heather.
Yeah, so I know it's an issue and it's something that a lot of us have been concerned about, but actually the data, which is interesting, shows that women do support each other. So one of the reasons I just recently started a new VC fund that invest in women-led businesses in the Middle East, US, and Europe is because basically we don't have enough women in venture. So the data shows that only 8% of the partners at US VC funds are women, but if a women entrepreneur approaches a VC, she's twice as likely to get funded if there's at least one woman partner at that firm. So basically, because there are so few women venture partners, women entrepreneurs don't get funded as quickly because women are looking to support one another and invest in women. So I think we also need to change that dialogue and change that framework and believe that we're supporting each other. I have a women's angel network called Wayne that I started 5 years ago, and we have 50 women angels. And you know, they're very active in mentoring. Actually, we get asked a lot from entrepreneurs. We only invest in women-led companies, so we have a strong gender lens, but we get approached a lot by the guys because they want us to invest because they see how how active we are and also on boards, you know, as mentors. So I think that's partially true, and I know what you're describing, but I think it's also up to us to change that framework because the numbers actually do show that we invest in each other and we support one another that way.
Lisa? Yeah, I'd like to touch on that too. I think I've heard this a lot and it breaks my heart because, I mean, I've never really experienced it. I think in my entire journey since I've come to the UAE, I've only met like one woman who's been competitive, but it's not because I'm a woman, it's just she's the kind of person who's like very defensive and was very like weary of everybody. I had like pretty much no network when I moved here. So when we were starting our investor network, we really were saying, okay, we want to meet like the top influential women in the country or in the Middle East. And we would take these Entrepreneur Magazine or Arabian Business Magazine, top 100 most powerful Arab women, right? And I would find the emails online of each one of them. There's like a great tool, I might tell you guys one-on-one later, that you could just find anybody's email basically on the internet. And so I would find the emails of all 100 women and I would just email them saying, hi, my name's Elisa Freya, I'm launching Wamina, it's this new network and I'd love to get your insights. I got like a 75% response rate and every single one of those was, congratulations, that sounds awesome, let's make time to meet. Every single one of them, which blew my freaking mind. Because I was told that cold emails don't work, especially in venture and tech, and that women were competitive and were going to be like not supportive of a younger, newer, like women on the scene. So, and I saw statistics that said things like even, you know, female leaders tend to be harsher with their younger counterparts because the world was harsh on them, so they pass it on, it's subconscious, etc. But I really did not experience that. And if that's something that you experience, then like come hang out with my people. You need, like, you're with the wrong crowd, girl. Come hang out with us. We're really nice.
Change your crowd. Maybe that's
yeah, change your crowd. Ditch them.
would like to add something? No, shall we move to the next question? Yeah,
Hi,
please.
my name is Alex. As Her Excellency said something about the glass ceiling on general for the woman, how can you make sure that the women themselves, that they are not putting self-barriers to break this ceiling? This is first. And for a lot of expat women here in the UAE, on the region in general, there's some other gap than the gender gap between men and women to achieve the managerial level or the salary level. They have something called the nationality gap. So a lot of Arab expat women or Asian women here, they don't have the same chances as European women they have. So they have facing two problems. The gender gap, they are fighting with the men. And they're fighting also for the discrimination for the nationality opportunities. Like some woman like graduate for Cambridge. So she will have a better chances for the woman, for example, graduate from the Cairo University. So they're facing two gaps here. How can we make sure that we'll break this ceiling, as I said, for the first, the self-barriers, and close those gaps?
Thank you. For the self-barriers question, for the self-barriers question, we will expand on that later. So, but maybe if we try to answer the second one, the nationality gap, and how it affects women. You think in the UAE, I mean in the region or in general?
Let me say this clear. So as she said, a lot of CEO here is still being hooked up by men. So there's way more men in this positions than the women. Unfortunately, and this is a fact here, not only here, on the region, they will give the job for a woman came from London, from Cambridge, than the woman came from the Cairo, Egypt, or else. It's like this kind of gap exists. We can't deny that it exists. Sometimes women, like CEO women, she will choose a woman came from Paris, Sorbonne.
Yeah, but is it a person coming from that particular country or with that educational certificate?
Sometimes
people connect skills.
Yeah, sometimes it's about the university name. Sometimes it came from the fact it's a different nationality.
Okay, so we have employers here. All of them are employers in addition to everything else. So how do you, what's your criteria when it comes to nationality question when employing people? What to do with that?
I think for us, it is really about your credibility, your skills, comparing it to the role that we are looking for. When in Abu Dhabi government, for example, you will see a few women at the level of the CEO. But within this year, or from last year, more and more women are in the executive role, the executive director roles, and more are considered to be CEO. So at that level, the government is focused on ensuring that the appointment of the level becomes from the government, because it is really about ensuring that, when you are setting a board, we need to have women in the board. If you are setting CEO, and depending, for example, on the the type of the entity, for example, if it's an entity about human resources, they would prefer to have a woman who leads it, because it is not black and white, and we are still progressing into having a system that match the talents and the women that we have from expertise and the opportunities that in the market. Today we are getting into a world that has been, it's a monopoly of men, and it takes time to. You can't take out 10 and say, okay, let's have 10 women CEO. It has to come slowly, and then every woman who join, then everyone is looking at her like what she's gonna say next. Will she add value? Is she the right choice? And this is where, every woman who becomes a CEO, there is also that huge focus and evaluation, which will affect the next and the third, and the fourth CEO who will come and join the group. I also want to answer a question that was raised about the, why do we have such system here other than leadership within the UAE? Because we are a tribal, we are a community based on tribal. And within a tribe, if the leader of the tribe say, lead by example, and this is what we want to do, slowly the other tribes and the community starts to follow, because they have this trust system with the leader. And if this is acceptable with the leader, and it's okay to empower women, and yes, women has a role, slowly we saw the change that happened in the UAE. It took time. This was not a switch on and off. But today, because we had an amazing woman, our mothers, grandmothers, and the women who worked with Sheikha Fatima, who did an amazing job, this is today we are having much greater opportunity and much greater flexibility to enter these roles.
Thank you. I'm not sure if can we expand to answer the question on nationality biases? I don't know whether that's gender related, in all honesty.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, but Elisa, please
mention
do
something. So we have 6 team members at Wamina, all of which are women, except we had open applications. So men applied as well, and actually men got to the final rounds of some of the positions, but the women performed better. So we used to have we have different barriers to entry. They'd have to do case studies, etc. For our analysts, for example. Our analysts went through like 6 different rounds of trials and case studies before we selected our analyst. They are Norwegian, who grew up in Thailand. We have an Egyptian American. We have an Egyptian who grew up in Abu Dhabi. We have a Filipino girl. We have an American who's lived in DC and Jordan and Palestine for the past 6 or 7 years. So we're incredibly diverse. I guess because I'm a new generation, and maybe I'm not a conventional business leader. I'm a lot more fair and merit-based, and I understand that there are traditions in business to sometimes treat different nationalities with different value systems. What we look at is education and qualification, and I hired the best of the best. The only way that I saw nationality playing a role was that we got far fewer Emirati applicants, and actually less than 2% Emirati applicants for any given role, and that's because we cannot compete as a startup with a government salary. And so that's my only note, is that for us in the private sector, no matter how I hire, and everybody, I've this minimum salary, everyone, I don't care where you come from or what you do, your role is worth this much, this is what you get. But if I go to an Emirati graduate out of university and say, you want to be our junior analyst, here's the salary for junior analyst, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, I could go to Ministry of Education and get 3 times that amount, for example, as a starting rate. And I can't compete with that. So that is the only way that, for us, nationality really plays a role. And I won't selective hire, and I won't be unfair with a salary. So it just depends on whether we're lucky enough to find somebody passionate enough for the role. I don't really care where they come from.
And if you want to add something, Heather, please.
Yeah, so, I would think about it in a different way maybe. So it's something that we look at with entrepreneurs. We call it the grit factor. So it's the distance traveled. So if you look at somebody who went to American University of Cairo, comes from one of the elite families, had life pretty easy because they were born privileged, versus somebody who worked really hard, didn't have much money, didn't come from a wealthy family, went to Cairo University, studied engineering, did really well. I'm more likely to invest in the graduate of Cairo University than the AUC graduate, who was never hungry, didn't have to struggle, didn't have to work hard. So we look at something we call kind of the distance traveled. So how far did that person have to travel to get to where they are today? And that changes things a little bit, because then you don't just focus on things like, oh, this person went to Harvard and this person didn't go there, so I'm going to choose the Harvard graduate, because we know that the distance traveled was actually much greater for the person who didn't go to one of the Ivy Leagues or didn't come from a wealthy, privileged background.
I super disagree with that. I'm sorry. I really disagree with that, because I came from a super privileged background, and I have just as much work ethic, for example, as...
It's not work ethic, though. It's also about how hard they had to work to get to where they are.
But it doesn't matter how much you want something.
The barriers they had to overcome, the hurdles that
it doesn't
were in
mean
front
that
of
you
them.
have to, the work that you put out is going to be any better or any worse. Like, I didn't go to a prestigious university in the slightest. If anything, I went to a slacker university. But I went to, which was, by the way, an incredible university. I highly recommend it. But, you know, I worked my final semester, like a 40-hour work week for no pay, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and classes because I was passionate. And so somebody to tell me that somebody else, just because they came from, let's say, a lesser privileged financial background, is more justified to get a certain role because they seem to be more hungry on paper, to me, like, I can't agree with.
It's on a case-by-case basis in both situations, I believe. Reem?
Okay, I'm going to talk from my experience as well. So I used to work for an Arab publication, which is part of Abu Dhabi Media, which means it's owned by the government. The editor-in-chief was an Arab expat woman. That was before I joined. When I joined, when she decided to leave, they hired a local woman. So again, I think it was according to qualification because you had like an expat and a local in the same position. And the team that we worked in was a mix of Arab expats and locals, mostly women. We had only one guy in the team. So I never felt the discrimination from my own experience.
Yeah, just to close on this, whether nationality is an obstacle in the UAE. There are a lot of criticism. Just look at my last name. I wouldn't have had a chance at all if the UAE wasn't the country as it is. Somebody once said, you're a super talented writer and I'll give you a chance. And I worked really hard still. News, piece writing, day, morning, during the night, never mind. But look at my last name. So if that was true, I really don't think so. That's when it comes to UAE. Worldwide, my Arab friends, who are part of my inner circle, real friends, they're making strides around the world. They are opening doors big time. So I really also don't think that them being Arabs, and some of them are Emiratis, and Arabs, mainly Lebanese and Jordanians, is an obstacle for those who really want to do something. Yes, it's hard. We all go through that, but that's how life goes. So I believe it's fine if we move on the next one. And now I want to first start with Heather, because with the next one is, it often stated that when a woman is appointed to a higher or a board position, that she is somehow only given an opportunity to prove herself further. And that women somehow expect from themselves and others to prove more dedication, more ability, more competence and everything to justify that role, whereas men, it's stated, seem to own that position from day one. So we have Heather, who started quite a few years ago, Women Angel Investors Network. Now you stepped up the game and did something even more with Mindsheet Capital. And you've been member of boards, quite a few of them, and for quite a few years. So can you tell me your experience through all those your ventures that you've been working on? And is it really true? Did you feel that you have to prove yourself more or to work harder, etc.? And then how do you achieve a work-life balance in that scenario, if so?
Yeah, good question. But so on the board question, I think in general, all minorities, including women, we have to work a lot harder to be taken seriously. So I feel like I always have to be 1,000%. You know, I have to be perfect. I have to be knowledgeable. And I've got to be able to back up everything that I say if I have a different viewpoint on a board, which is usually the case, especially if it's a board with all men. Women are different. We have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and come to different views of the world. So when we express that, if we don't have the data and all of the analytics, and maybe that's why I've been so data-driven throughout my career and focused on finance. But when you've got the data, you have to be 100% sure that it's perfect. So I think there's a lot of pressure that women feel to be perfect. You can't say something just kind of off the cuff, and then when you get called out on it, which always happens, you've got to be able to defend it. And there are lots of stories I have about this I won't go into now, but I think also some of the data points around having at least 3 women on a board. There's a board I'm on in Egypt called Sechem. It's the largest organics producer in the region. And it's not a startup, it's been around for 40 years. And there are 9 board directors. So I joined the board 2 years ago, and I was the second woman to join the board. And just recently, a third woman joined, and the dynamic has really shifted. I can tell already with the 3 women on the board, and we've got kind of a little unit. We don't always agree with each other, but we're supportive, and it's a different dynamic when you've got a board with more than 1 woman. So I think that those pressures and the expectation that all of your information, all of your viewpoints, everything can be proven. That's a lot to ask. In terms of work-life balance, I think women generally, you've probably seen the data, but the number of hours worked per day, whether in the house or out of the house, are just always a lot higher for women. I've got a very liberal husband who is Armenian American, grew up in Saudi, but he and I actually met doing our MBA in business school, so we're equal. I do tell him he's smarter than I am, but I actually believe he is. So I'm not just saying that to make him feel better, but I definitely work a lot more. We've got two young boys, 6-year-old and 8-year-old. So one of my missions in life is to make them feminists. So we'll see if I succeed. I'm not sure that I'm succeeding yet. One of them just told me on Women's Day of all days that he was role-playing with some, the stacked Russian dolls, and he had the little tiny one, and he said, "This is a baby girl. She's going to grow up and get married." And I said, "Okay, great. And what's her work going to be?" "She's going to take care of babies." And I almost started crying and just thought, well, God, all the work that I'm doing, with Inventure and trying to change all these results now in my own house, I'm raising this son who, believes this about women. And so then again, I think about the unconscious biases that form as children, from the media we watch, the schools, the teachers, all of these. It's not just the influences in our houses, it's also the society and all the other things that you can't control around them. So I think work-life balance, I still struggle with that. I'm a workaholic. I think this is part of the challenge of being female. We tend to be perfectionists because we have to be that much better to be respected, to be heard, to be valued. And I really hope that this changes this century.
So you think that women do need to work harder to prove themselves, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, come on, look at the US presidential election. It's crazy we had this super qualified woman and then the other person that we elect, it's not even, how can you even compare them, So, sorry, I'm American, so I can say this.
Okay, it happens. Elisa?
Do I think women need to work harder to prove themselves?
Do they really choose to? Do they believe in that? Is it true?
So I'll say that I think we had to fight a little bit harder as Wamina to be taken seriously, not because we were women as much as because we were younger. There was like a definite amount of ageism and the fact that we had very little experience in the finance space when we were starting a finance company, which I understand. However, there's an immediate assumption, when in our heads, before Wamina turned into Wamina, it was going to be called United Arab Angels, terrible name. And it was going to be a network of angel investors, not gender focused in the slightest, because of course at the time, acknowledging the gender means that you're fueling it, blah, blah, blah. I was 23 years old, and when I was picturing my company and my network, like all of the men looked like my dad, like all the members of the company looked like old Arab men. And my father's very handsome and very charming and a wonderful person, and I'd be honored to have a network filled with people like him. But it's just hilarious to me that a young 23-year-old woman, literally pictured 30 angels in a room and not a single female. And that's just because that's what a stereotypical angel investor is in the United States. I think the average age is 59 years old. They're all white, they're all male. And that's just what we were building. And then when we realized that bias, that was ridiculous. So we decided to challenge ourselves a little bit more. and actually turned out to be a little bit easier in one way, because it's far easier to go up to women and tell women, you know, so I want to build this network. I'm not telling you that I know how to invest, but I'm telling you that I want to build this platform and I want to help you invest. And I know other people who know more than all of us who are going to help us make the best decision. But I want to see this platform happen. They were more likely to give us a chance. Because when we'd go and we'd have meetings, you know, the conventional investors, the multi-billionaire, let's say, real estate developers, are going to look at us and they're going to say, what the heck is a 23-year-old or two 23-year-old girls going to tell me about investing? Are you kidding me? Like, what is, and it doesn't even occur to them that we're not trying to tell you what to do. We're just trying to help you do it by building something that, you know, will make it easier for you. So I think the ageism was a far bigger factor than any sort of sexism that we could have encountered. But I think, and going back to one of the questions that was asked earlier, it's very much self-imposed. You know, I think imposter syndrome is something that affects a far majority of female CEOs. I can't remember the statistics, so I'm not even going to try, but it is a majority of female CEOs experience imposter syndrome, including myself, where we don't think we belong where we are and that people are going to find out that, like, I've been faking it and I'm not supposed to be here. And so we work twice as hard to prove that we're supposed to be here, which means we then get like more awards and more accolades and more success. And then we think that that's fake. And so then we work even harder so that nobody can tell that we don't know what we're doing. And it's this perpetual kind of self-belief that's really criticizing and hindering our growth. And I think that's self-imposed, especially in this society. And from what I've seen with female CEOs, like in my portfolio companies as well, than it is, you know, let's say societally imposed.
But it is different, and I understand. I also think that when you're starting your own business, it's different than when you're building within and growing with something. Within government, what has been your experience? Did you feel that you need to prove yourself more, or you were perceived like that?
Yes. So I think with the growth of number of women, you know, in the past 10, 20 years into the government, there is that sense of, you know, when you are being introduced and people have certain perception about you. So I remember like 10 years ago, if I enter in a meeting and all of them are men, I always make sure that the first thing I will say, either technical, either financial, either analysis, because it has to be something that they will, you know, get in 1 second that I know what I'm talking about. So if you comment on the table or you comment on the notebook, or then they will just shut down and not listen to you anymore. So today, it is still some element of that still happens today. I mean, today I'm in a meeting in committees that I have. Again, all of them are men. And then, you know, a few months into these committees, I realized that they have a WhatsApp group that I'm not in. And because sometimes they say, yeah, we made the decision. I'm like, when did we make the decision? They say, we discussed it. When did you discuss it?
But I know what goes on in those WhatsApp group, by the way. You should be happy you're not in there.
Yeah,
they send ridiculous
things. And one of them, they said, no, we make jokes. I'm like, okay, you are not supposed to make jokes when it's about business. But because they're trying to give me reasons why I'm not included. But in the same time, there are, you know, it's a continuous different challenges every time. And for me, I feel we should not try to make them see something that maybe they are not ready to see. But it is really about us continuing to be able to, you know, say the right things and, you know, focus on the technical, the things that they don't expect from us.
I think that competence and self-confidence that comes from competence,
yes.
When you're aware that you're a master of your craft, that's the tool, basically. That's the shield that women use.
I agree with everything they said. I agree that women today, they have to work extra hard to prove themselves because there are a lot of stereotypes still. But I also think, like when I think of myself, when I realized that, you know, I had I studied what I wanted and I did what I wanted, I want to work harder. Like, it comes naturally to me. Because I've been privileged somehow to do what I wanted to do, so I want to put more than 100% into what I'm doing. So I think it's a mixture of trying to prove yourself and also pushing more because you want to give more.
Shall we ask our audience? Oh, so many hands. Okay, I think I promised last time to you, yeah? So can we please, Solange, there? Yeah. Okay, we'll start with you and then I promise. Okay, please do. Go ahead.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Consuela. I'm a business coach for female entrepreneurs. I actually want to just challenge a little bit the definition of leadership, if you allow me, because I think we talk a lot about the number of women. We talk about gender, how many women we have in leadership positions. But personally, I think we're there now to actually challenge the way we lead and to embrace diversity. I used to work, I have an MBA, I used to work in finance like Heather and Elisa for a long time and used to be surrounded by a lot of men. But also, we were also a handful of women leading there, but there was no space for another way of leading. And if you understand what I mean, there is that masculine way of leading, and then there's a feminine way, which embraces more inspiration, a little bit more intuition, a little bit more flexibility, not as much competition. So I wonder how you view this, because I just don't think it's enough anymore because there's men also who like to lead in a different way. And I think it's time to embrace that as well, rather than just saying having more female leaders, but rather having more diversity in the way that we lead. So I wonder what you panel speakers think about that.
Basically, the question is more masculine and more feminine leadership style.
Yeah, in terms of values, in the way that we lead. Because even to have, for example, a female president in a country, if she does the exact same thing that a man has done for the past hundreds of years, there's not much change there, is there?
Any thoughts? Heather,
yeah,
please.
So I totally agree. And I never thought about this until last summer. A friend of mine told me about an amazing book you might know of, The Way of the Mysterious Woman, by an author. Her name is Suzanne Anderson. And she talks about archetypes. So she actually has an online class I did with 30 other women to learn about being feminine, basically, because all my life in the finance industry, I'd become very masculine. And it was sort of this journey personally to go through to learn about what does it mean to be feminine. And she has this matrix in this book that changed the way I view the world. It's amazing. She has 2 columns, feminine and masculine. And in this matrix, she has different variables. One of them is motivation. So masculine motivation is self-interest. Feminine motivation is purpose and community. So if you think about that as being kind of the driving force of why we do things the way that we do, we're not aligned in lots of ways. And I like using masculine and feminine because, it's not about men and women. You definitely have very masculine women who have made it because they had to adapt to the masculine structures to be successful. But in the process, they lost out on the whole feminine part of who they really are, which creates a lot of conflict internally. So I think it's really important to think about, and then also to ensure that those leadership models and styles are diverse, and I think that's, and part of it is self-awareness and everyone's own journey, but I think thinking about it in terms of archetypes versus men and women, I don't know if we'll ever know why we're different, but the reality is that that we are, and how does that affect then the business place, the way the world is designed. I just read something about architects, something like 93% of architects are men. And so if you look at the way the world's been designed and built, it's been primarily by men. And so sometimes as a woman, you don't feel like you fit in, big spaces, high ceilings, things that, just don't feel natural to who we are. And I think the more you think about it, the more hopefully some of these things will start to transform. But I think we're at that point right now where it's this point of transformation that's really interesting, and hopefully we'll see more of those archetypes and diversity.
If you don't mind that you answer other questions, because I want to keep our audience interact with us, please. No, we have one more here, I promised, and then we go, then one more.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you for this amazing opportunity for such open discussions. My name is Juldis. I'm working as a VP Tax in First Abu Dhabi Bank, and I'm also starting my own company, which is Happiness and Mindfulness at the Workplace. So the question that I have is basically, I was reading somewhere that we as a women, I actually agree with earlier speech by Her Excellency Hafsa, UAE Ambassador to Brazil, when she told that we as a women, we give up too easily. We sometimes lack self-confidence. So I was reading somewhere that men, they ask for the salary increase before they are ready, while ladies, they ask for salary increase when they already deserve, and they already, after 6 months, when they deserved the salary increase. And I was reading somewhere that at the corporate level, there are more male leaders than female, because again, we give up, we don't like office politics, we lack self-confidence. So I think it's up to us to be to show off or show up, to get out of comfort zone, to show that who we are, and just to be active. So what else you suggest to show that we are not worse?
Yeah, thank you. That's our next question. So if you don't mind, because we are running out of time, because we will answer that for sure. Can we hear from the lady in the floor? Hi.
Hi, good evening. And thank you for the wonderful insights. We did speak about finance, but the question I would like to ask is, because I'm a founder of my company, Commerce Connect, since 2014. When we talk about female scaling up, we don't have any advisory boards, especially when we come from SME sector. We don't have any advisory boards which can technically tell us, you need to move forward in this part. So how would you advise us to move forward in this particular arena?
To get an advisory board?
Yes, for the female entrepreneurs, we don't have anyone who can tell us technically how to move forward. We have a lot of financial institutes who support us to go to the next level for scalability, but we don't have any knowledge sharing mentors, if I may say it. Yeah?
I think we have a lot of them.
Two
of them have been super active in helping entrepreneurs. Lots of guys just say maybe to connect with the right people.
Yeah, there's a lot of different entities in the UAE. If anything, it's saturated with women's networks. Without it being industry specific, I think there's groups like Reach Mentoring or Mompreneurs, for example, that focus on female entrepreneurship and mentorship. They have two very different approaches, but it's kind of open. And so it's a wonderful way to find a mentor and potentially build an advisory board. But if you're looking for industry-specific advisors and you don't know what to do, I think...
That's my question.
Yeah, I think specifically do your research and target 10 different people that you think have the knowledge and the experience that can help you. And then without being creepy, stalk them. Reach out to them, send them a message on Instagram, or see if they're speaking at an event and try to go introduce yourself. Or do, what I did. If you want to come talk to me, I'll give you the online resource I did to find their emails. And so you can just send them a cold email and hope that they'll say yes to having coffee. But I think that from what I've seen, people have been very receptive. So if you just do your research and make sure that you're out there, you should find enough help.
Perfect.
For sure.
I'm going to take your advice on that.
Thank you for your question. I will add, I suppose you want to add something to this. It's fine. So, in addition, can we leave it for the next one? In addition to Rain and Mindshift Capital, you've been a mentor to for so many years through various groups. And now I will ask all of you, what has been a bigger obstacle for you? Some social pressure, like family pressure when it comes to succeeding in business? Or something in the workplace, like being interrupted or bro-appropriated, or the workplace double bind, etc. Or this, what has been mentioned, some inner, basically conflict, being it imposter syndrome, playing it small, victimhood, procrastinating. So social pressures, something from the outside or inside? What is preventing our success, and what did you do about it? Maybe let's start with you.
So for me, when I graduated from university, obviously everyone from the family was with me in getting a job. I got a job exactly 1 year after graduation. And I stayed there. As I told you, I was an editor for one of the magazines, one of the leading magazines in the Arab world, actually. And after 3.5 years, I decided to leave. I wanted to be on my own, to be an entrepreneur, because I took the expertise, the experience from them, and then I was like, I would like to try to be on my own. So the biggest obstacle for me was from the family when shifting into being independent, especially from my dad, because he was like, you studied in one of the leading universities and you were lucky to find a job in the same field as what you studied. So why do you want to, and the salary is great, so why do you want to leave? And I really wanted to leave because I wanted to challenge myself to see if I can make it. So what I was telling him is, I will leave, and if I fail, I will apply anywhere else. It's going to be fine. But you have to let me leave and try to do this. And he was so smart. What he did, he told me, let's go have coffee somewhere out. So he knows that the argument is not going to get like too much. So he took me out to like tell me, you're crazy, don't do this. But he couldn't convince me.
That's at a time when something called influencer wasn't
it was
defined and everything.
It was just starting. And I had noticed on my social media accounts, I was getting a lot of attention. So I was like, maybe I should try this. At the time, when I told my dad, he had no idea what that was. He thought I was crazy, even my mom. But I did it. At the end, I quit. And I struggled a lot for the first year. I remember my mom, 6 months in, she called me once and she was like, okay, so when do you think you're going to go back to work? Is it enough for you now? You've tried it for 6 months. And I was just starting. And I remember that was in like 2014. And it was still new. Like when you told people, oh, I work as a blogger, they gave you a weird look. Like, what's that? What does that mean? No, so it's not like now. But that was the main struggle for me, was family when moving into being an entrepreneur. But I had, the self-confidence part is that I had to fight them all myself. So yeah, it was all from me. Like I wanted it, so I fought for it. So that's my experience with that. And now they're so proud of me that I launched my own makeup brushes, like a makeup brand. And I'm co-hosting in Dubai TV. So no one's asking me to go back to work now. Now they're happy.
Yeah. You know, I heard from one entrepreneur, now they want to work for me. That was like, nobody's asking me to go back, now they want to work for me. In a government, so with leading such a huge organization with so many employees and so many different initiatives, what was your main obstacle that you had to maybe overcome? Was it outside or inside yourself?
So I come from a very conservative family. So when I told them I'm going to work at 2454 media company, they said, what will you do there? You are a financial, background. Are you going to be in TV? So this whole perception of a media sector was very new. And it took me, a long time to explain, the whole idea of content creation, or the element of media as an industry, as any other industry, and it's not about TV, news, and singers. When I joined 254, what I realized, because one of the core function of the company is to attract youth from the Emirati. And we used to get a lot of families coming. They want to meet the head of the organization because they want to ask them, why are you doing this? Why are you opening this business for our teens and for our children? And it's only when they come and they sit with me and they look at me like, okay, how boring I am. I'm not like, I don't know what is the image of media. And they say, Oh, you are the one who is handling the media. I say, yes, I am the one who's handling media. And they start asking about family. You know, is your father still alive? I'm like, yes, he's still alive. So you have those weird
but this
questions,
is real
weird
story.
questions. But then, you know, we engage with them about the content that they see. You know, so I ask them, are you happy about the content your kids watch on TV? No, we are not happy. Are you happy about the programs that is on TV? No, we are not. I say, okay, so today, together, we can make a change. So with your kids, if they get into the sector, this is how they will make the change. So they are not going to be necessarily in front of the camera, but they will do the script writing, they will develop the stories, they will develop the techniques so that your grandchildren get to have the content you want. And slowly, we made that movement where we brought the community around us, because then they understood what is the mission of 254. It is once this is done, today you feel that the project is no longer a company. The project became a part of a community. So all of these mothers and fathers started to talk about our story, and this is how we were able to get actually. Today we have around 12,000 Creative Lab members, volunteers, only linked with our project to learn and develop their skills.
Thank you. Heather?
And this is a hard question. I think it's dealing with our own perceptions of what success should be, and meeting that expectation constantly. So always feeling like, okay, I've done this, now what? You know, and moving on to the next bigger thing. And trying to figure out what's authentic. So why are you doing things? Are you doing things because this is something that's expected of you by society, by your family, by your culture, or is it because it's what you really want to do? So kind of always being present when you're thinking about big decisions. For me, when I left Wall Street in 2004, and I'd worked, in finance and done my MBA, but I knew that Wall Street did not capture my social values, and I got a job offer or job listing from three different friends in microfinance. So to join Grameen Foundation in the U.S., being a program officer for the Middle East. And I thought, okay, maybe it's a sign if I get this ad from three different friends from three different parts of my life. So I applied for the job, interviewed, got the job offer, and then I had to make the hard decision, do I leave Wall Street, take, a 100% pay cut, basically, and go to join Grameen Foundation, which was doing, kind of more social sector work. And at the time, I was engaged but not married, and my father-in-law was furious. He just could not understand it. Why would you go to business school, you go to an Ivy League university, do all of these things, and then something that a lot of people strive really hard to do, and then basically walk away from that and earn less money? So it was a really hard decision. And then next thing I knew, I was on a plane to Egypt. I then moved to Lebanon, basically started a joint venture company between the Abdulatif Jamil Group and Grameen Foundation. And I mean, it was an amazing experience. I think I was so afraid and so fearful of making that decision and making the wrong decision. And I think this is something especially a lot of women worry about, is, basically messing up or failing. But when you put yourself out there and you really think about what matters to me, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, what would I be able to say about my life and my dreams and my ambitions, and doing the things that you want to do because you want to do them, not because somebody thinks you should do that, and you have these external parameters that define your success, but figuring out what success is for you and basically being true to that.
And your father-in-law, what did he tell you after a few years, once you have one after another successful venture and so many initiatives and group that she has formed? So not maybe at this point now, I'm sure he's convinced, but how has, more than convinced, but how has that?
I mean, I think part of his understanding where people come from. So he's a first-generation immigrant to the U.S. he left Syria, where he's Armenian, and for him, he had a very different background than my background. So it was just complete craziness to think about working on Wall Street, making a lot of money, being well respected, to walk away from that to do something that was paid less and probably didn't have the status. So then in his mind, he started thinking, okay, she works for charities. So he still thinks that that's what I do. He doesn't understand that I talk a lot about impact investment, and I think women in general are drawn to more kind of values-based work and also investing. So a lot of the businesses I get excited about usually have a social angle to them. And I think you can do both. I think you can make money while also improving the world around you simultaneously. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. But for someone like him with his background, education, it's hard to understand.
So one of the ways of handling that pressure coming from the society or the family is understanding where they're coming from and how to overcome maybe some inner imposter syndrome or whatever. You talked a lot about that. So when it's not from the society or family, when they are supportive, but so how did you overcome all of that?
Tamara already knew the answer to my question because I did an interview with her before where I talked about some of the bigger struggles I've gone through and how they were, very much came from inner Elisa. I definitely had the same thing where my dad wanted me to have a serious job, didn't get what I was doing, totally didn't understand what a website was, what's the point, and what his dream was for me to work at 2454 under Noor al-Kaabi, his dream was that his daughter would go there, serve the government or whatever. But that wasn't, I think that was an obstacle, but not the biggest obstacle I had to deal with. The biggest obstacle by far was just learning to, it sounds so cheesy, and honestly, saying it at a women's forum makes it sound even cheesier, but to trust my own voice. So because I had zero formal education in finance and had zero background in entrepreneurship, and I kind of just jumped into launching a business in finance in a country that I'd never lived in before, with a brand new network, and my co-founder, had 2 years work experience more than me. That's nothing. But to me, that was so much when I'm 23 years old. And it was in finance and corporate. So pretty much anything she said goes, especially in terms of finance and structures. And I was educating myself. I was reading a book every 2 weeks in this space. We have I think the number is 2,300 articles that we've read through that are entrepreneur resources that we just binge ate early on, where we were just reading information and data. And I didn't give myself the benefit of the doubt that I actually was understanding the content that I was taking in and that I was learning. Because 2 years later, 3 years later, I was still telling myself, you're not a finance person. You shouldn't be in finance. Finance is not your thing. Numbers are not your thing. Strategy is not your thing. Structure is not your thing. Just trust. And the problem was that I was telling myself that, but when I would see mistakes and when I would see issues arising, instead of voicing my opinion and saying, hold on, that doesn't really add up, or well, isn't that going to cause us an issue in 2 years? I would just stay quiet. And so these problems were growing and actually hindering not only the business, but then hindering my belief in myself and in the business. And it took me a really long time to be able to just speak up and say, it's wrong. Because if I did it once and then somebody would counter argue, then I'd be oh, that's right, they know better. When they didn't necessarily know better, I just thought I always knew less. And so being able to actually have the confidence to just say, look, this is my business, this is my journey. I think I know what's right for it. And if I make a mistake, I'd rather it be on my own terms. And making that mind shift, right? To quote your venture capital firm, to make that mind shift and all of a sudden saying, hold on, I'm the boss here. I should know what's best for my business, and it's okay to put my foot down and to believe my own voice.
I hope that answered your question, the lady who asked. Okay, we'll accept only one question, and because we're running out of time, and if you all don't mind that they will stay for the networking session after the event, so please feel free to approach them. So one question, and then we'll close. Please.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and actually I don't have a question, but there was a lady, the first lady who came up with a question, a fine engineer, I forgot her name. She asked a really good question, and we didn't get a chance to answer it. And she asked, why are Emirati women strong compared to other regions? And I actually asked myself that question probably like a year ago. And I think I have an answer, and I think it's because in the UAE and the GCC, women never had that role of being like a beauty figure or a beauty icon. Like, you know, most women sometimes in other countries, they're like the weather girl or cabin crew, and we never got to be that. We just got to be women who are educated and go out and look for a job and get a job for our qualifications. And it actually brings me to Alreem's story about like her reality of her family going into education and only education. And maybe that kind of links it. But I think it's because our men respect us and they value us so much. And maybe it got translated in a different way that we didn't like. But I really do believe that our men really value us, our fathers, our brothers, and sorry, I'm getting nervous. Okay, so yep, and I've always, in my career, I've always had lady managers. And the only time I had a male manager was when I worked in the army, in the UAE army, a male-dominant cultural, traditional environment, and I actually flourished. So I do believe that our men value us. And yes, thank you. Sorry, some people are behind the column. And I also want to end, wrap up what I'm saying by, there's someone who said, I can't quote it, but I'll say it as a metaphor. And I hope that everyone here is a strong woman for a better cause, which is humanity. And it brings me to Her Excellency Hafsa's question, are we there yet? Because when we are there, there's a much bigger role, which is for humanity to mature. And that metaphor is, imagine society is a bird, and it's got two wings. And one wing is men, and the other wing is the women. And if women are suppressed, that wing is broken. So that bird will never soar, it will never fly high. And I hope that bird has two wings to fly high, and for maturity, for humanity to mature. Sorry, thank you. I just had to say that. Thank you so much. And this event has been very nice, and I'm really amazed at all the men who are here. Thank you so much.
Can you just tell us your name and what you do? Yeah, I want to challenge you because I want you to get used to it because you're so good at it.
Sorry,
so
yeah. My name is
next
Hannah.
time you're on stage.
My name is Hannah, and I just started my first week at Cleveland Clinic, but before that, I have a communication background. I did media, and I think my aunts both did education, and that was very eye-opening what you said, Alreem. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Your energy is amazing, by the way. Seriously, we can feel it all the way over here.
In conclusion, one line only. What would be your advice to women here and women who are watching us through the SWU network around the world, regionally? What's one line that you think that now is something that's pending, maybe?
So I would say just take the day as it is. Every day, applaud yourself for making it for that day, and be the one who, not putting a lot of stress on yourself. So it is really about reflecting, making sure, staying true to who you are, and focus on what you love and enjoy to do. That's it.
Heather?
Yeah, I don't know if I can follow that. Ditto. No. So I think, definitely be true to who you are. And also there's this idea of accept yourself as you are. So don't try to be someone who you're not. Don't try to create metrics for success that might not be your metrics. Create your own idea and view of success and what it means for you, and then stick to that. And life is short. It's not about money. It's about purpose and figuring out what you really care about and doing that.
Elisa?
Yeah, so without repeating anything, because these are wonderful points, I fully agree. I think really the important thing that we should all remember is to pass it forward. So, you know, work on believing yourself day by day, but remember that, like, there are women and girls and even young men that are entrepreneurs that are just starting out, and they're only like 2 years behind where you are. Like, a mentor doesn't have to be 5 to 10 or 50 years ahead of you. They don't have to be the leaders in the industry, right? A mentor can really be like your best friend who just happened to have started like a year before you did. So you can be someone's mentor without even knowing it. So be open, be vulnerable, and don't be afraid to kind of pass it on to the next generation.
Reem?
For me, I would say be willing to take a chance and also be willing to fail. It's okay to fail, because when you fail, you give yourself the chance to grow and to reach success, and believe in yourself and follow your dreams. And it sounds cliche, but when you do it, you really flourish. So give yourself the chance to do what you really believe in. And I really agree with her on what she said, that define your own success. Maybe for some people what you're doing is crazy, but as long as you're passionate about it, go for it.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause. Thank you. This was really one honest discussion. I'm really impressed. Thank you. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to the Krypto Labs team. I just want to mention that tomorrow you will have one more interesting discussion happening here and focusing on blockchain and cryptocurrency in partnership Bitfury, one of the leading blockchain platforms, and Emercoin, a rapidly growing cryptocurrency platform. Thank you to the sponsor of the event, that's Patchy, and also to the main partners, Dubai Business Women Council, Entrepreneur Middle East Magazine, and 2454. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you at those wonderful events next time. And once again, thanks to the Krypto Labs team for inviting Entrepreneur Middle East to join us. Thank you all.